The Abrego Garcia case, it is emblematic of a larger issue, right? That the bounds of executive power, how far can it go as it pertains to immigration policy? The White House has put out some confusing and contradictory statements since Abrego Garcia was deported to El Salvador by mistake. It's a lot to keep up with, so we wanted to bring in our senior reporter, Daniel Dale, with a fact check to help us understand what are the facts. So Daniel, from the beginning, the White House has admitted in court filings that this man was sent to El Salvador by mistake. But listen to what one of the president's top aides, Stephen Miller, told Fox.
He was not mistakenly sent to El Salvador. A DOJ lawyer who has since been relieved of duty, a saboteur, a Democrat, put into a filing incorrectly that this was a mistaken removal. It was not. This was the right person sent to the right place.
So what are the facts here?
Pam, Mr. Miller's suggestion that some lefty saboteur at DOJ is the reason people are calling this deportation a mistake is just wrong. Various Trump administration officials have also called it a mistake. So here are the facts. Mr. Abrego Garcia was under a 2019 court order that said he could not be sent back to El Salvador because he had a credible fear of facing persecution from gang violence in that country. And then this year, of course, the Trump administration did send him back to El Salvador. Now, the particular career DOJ attorney Mr. Miller is calling a Democratic plant, who was quickly put on leave after he expressed frustration with the administration in court over the case, did say this deportation should not have happened, but he wasn't going rogue in saying that. ICE and DOJ officials have told the courts at least 3 other times that sending Mr. Abrego Garcia to El Salvador was an error. First, in March, acting ICE Field Office Director Robert Cerna told the court under penalty of perjury that it was a, quote, administrative error. Then this month, DOJ lawyers, including senior officials appointed by Trump, told an appeals court, quote, he was sent to that country due to an administrative error. And then days later, the Solicitor General John Sauer, the Trump-appointed lawyer who represents the administration at the Supreme Court, so a top lawyer, told the Supreme Court, quote, the United States concedes that removal to El Salvador was an administrative error. So Mr. Miller pinning the idea that this was an error on one sneaky Democratic plant at the Justice Department is nonsense.
All right, so the Supreme Court's ruling backed in part the previous district judge's order that requires the Trump administration to, quote, facilitate. There's a lot of emphasis on that word, the return of Abrego Garcia. But in the Oval Office yesterday, Miller made it sound like the White House came out on top in this ruling. Take a listen.
So it's a 9-0
in our favor.
In our favor against the district court ruling, saying that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual at El Salvador's sole discretion was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time.
All right, what are the facts here?
There are a bunch of issues with Mr. Miller's description of that ruling. I encourage people to read it for themselves. It's pretty short. So 4 things here. First of all, Miller did not mention that the ruling said the Trump administration has to, quote, facilitate Abrego Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador. The ruling did also say the administration is owed, quote, deference in foreign affairs, but the court explicitly said they have to facilitate him getting out of jail in El Salvador. Now, the administration is arguing, as you guys have talked about, that the order to facilitate doesn't mean they actually have to do anything at all to get him out of this foreign prison. They argue that in the context of immigration law, facilitate just means they have to take domestic steps to make sure he can get back into the U.S. if El Salvador independently chose to release him. It's not clear how that's going to fly in the courts. Regardless, it's not what the plain language of that Supreme Court ruling says. And second, that wasn't the end of the ruling. The Supreme Court also wrote, quote, that the government should be prepared to share what it can concerning the steps it has taken and the prospect of further steps. And so far, the administration has been sharing only the vaguest, slimmest of steps updates to the district court judge who ordered those updates. Third of all, it's worth noting the Supreme Court did not explicitly guarantee that Mr. Abrego Garcia can be deported again. It simply wrote his case should be, quote, handled as if it would have been had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador. Now, that might very well mean deportation. CNN and others have reported he is deportable to anywhere other than El Salvador, but the Supreme Court didn't actually state anything about a second deportation. And then fourth and finally, regarding Mr. Miller's claim of a 9-0 ruling, the Supreme Court's 3 liberals actually signed on to a statement saying they would have let stand the district court ruling that required the government not only to facilitate Mr. Abrego Garcia's release from custody, but to, quote, effectuate his return to the U.S. within days. The Liberals wrote that it's plainly wrong to say the U.S. government cannot do anything to help someone once a deportee crosses the border from the U.S. So this suggestion from Mr. Miller that all 9 justices are on board with his own claims about the limits of the administration's responsibilities and powers here is clearly not true.
Yeah, right. On that note, I'm just reading, it's only 4 pages. The Liberal justices said, I agree with the court's order that the proper remedy is to provide Abrego Garcia with all the process to which he would have been entitled had he not been unlawfully removed to El Salvador. There's a hearing later today, a lot at stake there. Daniel Dell, thank you so much.
Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen from Maryland, where Abrego Garcia was living when he was arrested by ICE agents last month, has now said he's requested a meeting with the president of El Salvador during his visit in the United States while he's in Washington. Van Hollen also said he's prepared to go to El Salvador himself if Abrego Garcia is not returned very soon, writing to the Salvadoran ambassador to the United States. This, in part, I have met with Mr. Abrego Garcia's wife, mother, and brother, and as you can imagine, they are extremely worried about his health, safety, and continued illegal confinement, as am I. And joining us now is Senator Van Hollen. Senator, thank you for your time. You requested this meeting with President Bukele while he's in D.C. Is the meeting set? Have you heard back?
Kate, it's good to be with you. I did request it. I've not heard back from the president of El Salvador. And as I said in that letter, if I don't hear from him and Abrego Garcia is not quickly returned, I do intend to go to El Salvador this week to show solidarity with his family. As you indicated, the Trump administration itself has admitted that he was abducted and sent to this prison in error, and he should get his due process.
They show no intent of doing anything to bring him back anytime soon, that is for sure. If by midweek, I mean, that could be tomorrow, nothing happens, you go to El Salvador, do you have a hope of leaving with him when you come back, or what can you accomplish there?
Kate, I hope to meet with officials of the government of El Salvador. I don't know if the president is going to be in country at that time. I also hope to visit this notorious prison to see Abrego Garcia, to let him know that his family and friends are very worried about him, as am I. I think that the situation for both the Trump administration and the president of El Salvador is unsustainable. Because the Supreme Court, as you reported, by 9-0, has said the Trump administration has to facilitate his return. And you have the president of El Salvador saying, well, I don't have the power to release him. Both things are untrue. The president could, of course, facilitate his return. After all, the United States is paying El Salvador money for this prison. And of course, the president of El Salvador could release him. So at some point, I think this becomes unsustainable. People are going to keep calling for his release because the Trump administration itself has admitted he was wrongfully whisked out of the country, and we have a 9-0 decision from the Supreme Court.
This is very important, obviously, to you, as he and his family are constituents of yours. But I heard this somewhat debated last night. And what do you say to someone, I'm picking a random place, Idaho? Why should we, the collective we, care about this one case?
Well, we should care about this case because of due process. Every American citizen is due their due process, and people who are in the United States under legal protective status, like Abrego Garcia was, are entitled to due process. So if the president gets to